From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. I'm George Norrie with Mitch Battros. He began production of his syndicated television show, Earth Changes TV, back in 1995, switching over to radio as well. And he has been looking at Earth changes for a long, long time, and he's with us for a couple hours to talk about many things. Mitch, how are you? How's the family, my friend?
Well, we're all pretty tired. My wife partially severed her finger on Saturday.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, using a food processor. Those blades are unbelievable.
You were out of town on a speaking engagement, right?
No, I wasn't out of town, but I was teaching a class here in Seattle.
Oh.
And, she was in an absolute panic when I got the call. And I didn't know if it was her, was it our daughter, what happened?
I hate those calls. I
knew you would, George.
Yeah.
I knew, it's the nightmare of every father.
Yeah.
And finally she settled down a little bit, and I knew as she was starting to tell me what had happened that it wasn't the pain, because she has an incredible pain threshold. It was what she saw.
Yes.
And if you can imagine looking down at a finger dangling, and the amount of blood, and it was just shock.
Did they stitched her back? She okay there?
Well, it's good news for that. They did stitch her back about 55 stitches. They were able to save the tendon, the flexor tendon, but they were not able to save the nerves on one side.
Oh.
But I would call it a success, because in my mind the goal would be to have as close to 100% flexibility as possible. It looks like that it's going to go that way.
True. And you know what, Mitch? The body's an incredible instrument. And, once those nerves start to find each other and where they're supposed to go, she might get full use again.
The doctor did mention that, it is possible that the nerves could grow back. That's true.
Look, we've got so many things going on, Earth changes. I don't know how to begin because, we're looking at this story that Hubble takes a picture of what could be a comet or a collision of two asteroids. You've been monitoring Yellowstone. That's going crazy. The sun, some weird things happening there. My gosh, what's going on? And also, something tell me about this ancient text story and this scientific discovery.
Oh, well, it's ongoing. There's no one specific thing. We'll cover a few of them right now. Matter of fact, let's start with your lead article.
Okay.
Some of the agencies are putting out as being new of some infrared view of the galaxy, but staying with the suspected asteroid collision. George, you've been saying it for some time now, and I've got to tell you that I agree with you, and how it's manifesting in the scientific community, and that is the question is: are there more asteroids right now, especially the ones that we see with about 24-hour notice? Mm-hmm. Granted, they're small, but it doesn't take much.
That's right. I mean, 200 feet, a 200-foot-long asteroid that, let's say, hits in the wrong place at the wrong time could do serious damage.
It could. The Hubble Space Telescope is the one who captured this as part of the Linear project. This occurred on the 25th and 29th, or through the 29th of January, so just few days ago. It did show that complex X pattern, which people can see what they'd like to see. But I would concur that it does indeed appear like a asteroid collision. Of course, that's going to happen all the time in the Oort cloud, for example, but we've just never captured this. And that is the undercurrent of everything we're going to talk about tonight, is that our advancement in instruments has caught up, if you will. It's a full circle thing. It really, with ancient text. So what is happening almost on a daily basis is that the new discoveries, I'm talking like day before yesterday, is doing nothing but verifying what our ancestors have told us millennia ago. I find it exhilarating, extremely exciting. Of course, there's the scary part of it, too, because not all the prophecy and predictions are all that pleasant.
That's right. A lot of them are doom and gloom.
They are. But every elder that I've spoke to, regardless of the tribe, whether it be Hopi or Mayan or Anunnaki or Dogon, is they really, really are absolutely convinced that we do have an influence collectively on outcomes. Now, I think for most people that's so far away to touch that, you have to step into quantum physics. You have to step in to what the Mayans describe as ether. You have to step into what science calls charged particles. And when you can take that leap, then it starts to make sense.
Well, that's true. What also is just incredible, it's baffling, but as you talk about how new technology is catching up to ancients, how did the ancients know this? They didn't have the technology. I've
given that a lot of thought, George, because that question inevitably is going to come up, and I got to tell you, though, a few times I've been stumped. I really didn't know how to answer it. A lot of the people who attend my conferences are the science community.
Mm-hmm.
About 1/3, 2/3, a larger number are people who are a little bit more open-minded and certainly embrace metaphysics and quantum physics and so forth. One thought, of course, is alien, some type of alien knowledge was brought down and presented. I would love to embrace that, but I haven't found any evidence yet. But I have an open mind. What I think it is that the Mayans, as well as other indigenous tribes, are far more older than we had ever believed.
And sophisticated?
I don't know about that.
Really?
It depends on what you mean by...
Well, let's say that there was an area of this planet that had incredible knowledge, incredible technology. Let's call it Atlantis, for lack of a better place. And what if those people had the ability to do astronomy, high mathematics, and these people wandered around the planet, and they went to like the Dogon tribe that talked about the Sirius star system when we didn't even know about it. Mm-hmm. And, what if they went to different regions of this planet and they told them these things? They taught them these things. So it's not ET technology, but it's Earth technology based on an advanced civilization that somehow is gone.
George, I can tell you've given this some thought, and it's taken me really 15 years to get where what you're describing now. There had always been this little gap that I couldn't quite tie together. Until someone mentioned that, gee, Mitch, is it possible that perhaps that particular tribes are much, much older than we, ever believed? So I agree with that part, George, but I think their advancement was more inner than outer. In other words, I'm not so sure that they had the spacecrafts that we have, and the
maybe not, yeah.
Although they may have. However, I believe their natural human true capacity was far escalated than what we have now, and that, to use Mayan prophecy, is where we're going now. That we're in that time. That is what this transition period is about. Is the elevation of the human.
One of the tribes in Australia talked of a comet or an asteroid that plunged into the planet and created craters in Australia. Craters which are millions of years old, Mitch, except this tribe is only supposed to be about 40,000 years old, maybe 20,000 years old. Some people are beginning to theorize maybe they witnessed this thing millions of years ago.
I'm keeping an open mind. Absolutely. I really am. I couldn't pass a peer review with the material I have now, but my intuition, and I always have to have at least a measure of science to go with it, it really gives some gravity to this, George. I hope a year from now we can talk about this again with some fairly decent depth.
As we come up to the break, tell me about earthchangesmedia.com. What's on the website these days?
Today it's been a little slow because all of us have been
had a little family situation.
Had a little family situation, and just kind of. I think she's doing much better than I am. You'll find all the latest breaking news in both the science community, ancient texts, and the amateur community, especially the astronomy amateur community. Is they still, most people don't realize this, find 90% of the bolides that are discovered. So that is one of my best connections, is not only with NASA, NOAA, and the European Space Agency and so forth, but with the amateur astronomy community.
Last week we were talking about the possibility of some more flares from the sun that could really screw up terrestrial radio, if anything. So I would sound like on a lot of stations. The sun is starting to get a little active, Mitch. So let's talk about that when we come back, and also definitely got to get into Yellowstone. I want to get your take on that as well, okay? Special guest, Mitch Battros. And when I come back in just a moment, we will talk with him about some of these. And the next hour, we'll open up the phone lines as well. We'll talk with Mitch about these earth changes right here on Coast to Coast AM. Like I said, Yellowstone. Hundreds of earthquakes on the average a day over the last several weeks. Hundreds. We'll be back. Are you a StreamLink member yet? Well, you can be for just pennies a day. You just sign up by going to coasttocoastam.com and pick up podcasting and downloads of past archives, use your iPhone, and just have some fun with StreamLink, part of Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. We're with Mitch Battros. He is an expert on earth changes. As a matter of fact, his website is called earthchangesmedia.com. Mitch, when you were a little kid, were you fascinated with earth changes and the weather and things like that?
Geology. Geology was my favorite subject. I loved it. Specific to weather phenomena, no, not really. I mean, just a general fascination. I grew up in South Texas, and where real rain happens. Now that I live in Seattle, have lived here for the last 21 years. It's a light drizzle. It's just different shades of gray all year long. But the downpours and the thunderstorms and occasional tornadoes, and then whenever a hurricane would come up the Gulf of Mexico, the hurricane itself wouldn't reach us, but the storms it presented. But no, I'm not the storm chaser type. But geology, I was always very interested in.
How do people in Seattle react to all these stories about Seattle getting hit with a huge tsunami one day?
Unfortunately, for the 3 minutes that it might have some airtime, and I don't blame you. I mean, that's just kind of how we are. Until it happens in our backyard, we just kind of go along in life.
Yeah.
And there's a good component to that. I mean, I'd hate to be the type of person who was on edge all the time. There really is something called disaster fatigue. And it's kind of it lulls a person into complacency, and that actually can be dangerous. That's why really where my interest in all this came from, George, was I'm with the Red Cross and with FEMA, trained with the emergency management facility here, and that's what really got my interest before the show, and then what I do now. And it's evolved from a very hands-on, practical point of view to embracing and implementing that of ancient text, which in my opinion, and is certainly well documented in my 2 books and a third one about to be released, as well as all the articles on my website, that not all, but many of the tribes, and the Mayans I'm particularly fond of, I have some strong connections there, the accuracy of what they said. And what I do that is probably different than many others is bring science with me. So when science events occur and support and endorse what has been said in ancient texts, that's when I really throw my weight behind it. And that has been happening more and more each year, this year more than ever. And to me, it's more settling than it is upsetting.
Yeah.
I mean, some people may see it as, that there is some stability, that there is some sense of unfolding, as opposed to not knowing what's going on. I guess it'd be the question: do you want? Would you be the person who would want to know, the dangers that you're walking into, or would you be the person that doesn't want to know anything because they, don't want to be bothered?
Yeah, and seeing I want to know what I'm walking into.
Yeah, I mean, with the reasonable amount. I don't want to be neurotic either, and that's why I often put to tell people to use discernment. This is what's scary, George. I'm just a little bit younger than you, and when we were going through school, and especially college, we learned things such as critical thinking. That has all but vanished. It's that double edge of the internet. Of course, the very, very positive part of it. The downside is just that it's really dumbed down a lot of people. They're just not going far enough to individually research some of the stuff that comes across the screen, and that's why I have to be very careful when I publish announcements. There's been 3 times that out of 15 years, not a bad record, that I missed. I really flubbed up. And the latest one just occurred last week. I did put my weight behind what did come from actually NASA JPL, that the storm that was climbing up the West Coast, that as another storm was coming behind it, and the winds would reach 200 miles an hour, that the jet stream had dropped. This had just come on the heels of the M-class flares that we had, although relatively small, still could have some KP index or some charged particle resonance. Sure. Residue. So I did a bit of a misstep, although I can back it up with the documentation from NASA JPL that they did indeed believe that there was a stronger exception of what was going on in your area, Southern California. But it didn't match what some people had sent to me, signed off by the USGS. I contacted that person, unfortunately, after I went ahead and published that article, and he's in Japan right now. And evidently a few other people have contacted him as well. And he said, "No, I'm sorry, but somebody has impersonated me." So I of course, with a 3 events out of 15 years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of publications, I think it's a pretty good record. However, I really need to be careful in the way I present it, because I have started in the last 2 years receiving some pretty scary emails of people that, that...
You mean threatening?
No. That they're panicked. They're bewildered. They're almost suicidal.
Yeah, I guess you have to be careful with that.
And yes. And so I'm kind of fine-tuning because, a few years ago what I was saying was, that's interesting, and it wasn't happening as often. Well, now that the accuracy has raised and the events are escalating, people are no longer just kind of, letting it roll over the shoulder. They're starting to take it to heart. So, I have to grow with it. And of course, I want to keep all my connections with the science community, such as NASA, Royal Observatory, and so forth.
It's almost, Mitch, like we're on a clock, and it's ticking. It's ticking like crazy, and people feel it. And I don't know what the end point is of this ticking clock, but I think people are feeling something is happening. And I keep harping back to some kind of asteroid or Earth change, as opposed to any kind of terrorist activity, which obviously is out there.
Well, again, George, I think your intuition is really significant because no one would go on record with this, but we're certainly noticing, mostly the publications coming from the science community and the amateur astronomy community. Now, it is possible that it's purely for funding. We always have to, evaluate that component. New administration and Obama has made some. Obama, as I understand it, has sidekicked the moon thing.
Oh yeah, I mean we got Hoagland coming up a little bit later tonight, and he's going to jump all over this thing.
Okay.
And you're right. What's going on, Mitch, with the sun?
Yes, that we are in cycle 24. It started very, very slowly and very, very late. We had long periods, 200 and something days of no sunspots at all. It almost matched a record, but that's only of the recordings that we have. So I can assure you that the Earth has seen this, or the Sun has presented that many times before, and I'm sure in larger variations. But it was a quiet. It's been a quiet cycle 24. We had a little activity a couple of weeks ago with some M-class flares, and the class of flares, if you could C is the smaller one. Let's call that common. So a C-class flare would be a common flare, so nothing to be overly concerned about. M-class flare, let's call it moderate. So now it's kicking up there, and it could cause some damage.
Right, especially if it's aimed at us, right?
Exactly.
Direct hit. Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The one that occurred in 2003, an X-45.
Huge.
Unbelievable. It literally pegged the instruments that NOAA and the U.S. Air Force had. They only went to X-10 class flares at the time, and of course they recalibrated everything. And I just so happened to have the director of NOAA on the phone in an interview when it happened, and it had crossed the eastern limb of the sun. So even though it crossed the eastern limb, in other words, started to rotate around the backside, it was so big it still had an influence. So if you can imagine if it was facing us at the time of the event.
Yeah, what could have happened?
Well, worse as every day passes, because we're so dependent on electricity. It would be it would fry pretty much all electrical circuit. The power grids they're very old, and some of them were even designed in a circular fashion, especially the ones around up in Niagara and part of Canada. It's a loop, and it's been some really high up in the space agencies theorized that because it was built in a loop, very large loop, took in Ohio and Michigan and up in Ontario there, that it ended up attracting a surge from the sun at that time, especially the 1989 event.
It would have wiped out satellites too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Would it be some of the sci-fi things we see on, at the movies, where this mass flame just, rips the whole terra firma? I think a a gamma ray burst would do that. If we were close enough, and unfortunately it seems like we're getting closer all the time, to a pulsar or a nova, then absolutely it would.
But an X flare directly would not physically hurt somebody, would it?
That is harder to support. Personally, I say yes. My evidence is related to how it affects the body.
Okay, I see.
I have some
electrically.
Yes. I mean, if you've ever been to an acupuncturist, especially a good one, or someone who's seasoned,
I stay away from needles, Mitch.
Well, sometimes they use magnets now, but it's basically the same. It's a grid that they're working with, an electrical grid. We call them, meridians. But we're electrically charged people, really.
Well, it's the body electric. Right?
Exactly. Absolutely. So I no doubt believe that the Mayans and many of the other indigenous tribes knew this, that our connection with what's happening externally, especially in the galaxy, and I do want to circle back around to that in just a little bit, that it's not only going to have a physical effect in the way of Earth changes externally, earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, but internally. Now, that may be good and may be bad. It depends on where each individual is. Now, many people think that what a wonderful thing of this transition we're in, and how we're in the age of Aquarius, and we're all going to be these enlightened beings. You know what? The elders don't speak of it that way. They say it depends on where the person is and the road they choose. In other words, we're all going to be confronted with ourselves. So if we're not in alignment with our truth, in integrity, we'll probably have a pretty hard time, and it's not going to be a pleasant.
No. What about now with these X flares, these big ones? If it hits us directly, what happens to the side of the planet that's in darkness that hasn't rotated to the sun yet? Are they going to be okay? The people on that side?
They're going to be okay, but they'll still be affected because we have what's called a dipole. If you can visualize a magnet at the center of the Earth's core, and the currents flow in and around. So when a solar flare hits the Earth's magnetic field, the Earth's magnetic field, which is our protector, warps around the Earth. It kind of looks like a football. It can warp so much depending on the power of the solar flare. If the magnetic field begins to weaken, or there's cracks in the magnetic field, is what's being described now, then those charged particles will filter through and can be quite damaging. But it also affects the other side of the Earth as well, because, just as if you were, just to give a visual, sometimes when they test helmets for bicycles, on these fast, yeah, and you see the smoke in the trail, because they want to know about the aerodynamics and how it hits the front of the whether it be an airplane or a helmet, but it also wraps around to the back, and you can see the trail of smoke, coming from. So the magnetics, the charged particles do the same thing. It will have a front impact that obviously would be the most damaging, but it does wrap around, and certainly can have a lesser effect though on an opposite side.
It's a coming, whatever it is, Mitch. You know that eventually.
Well, yes, and what's really interesting and I'm quite pleased with is the science community is recognizing that as well.
Could we build a grid system that would still function if we got hit by a massive X flare? I don't know if we could insulate that or not. That's
hard to say. I don't know. That's not my field. I really can't comment on it. It's a very interesting point. I would definitely have to say that certainly you could minimize or reduce the damage.
I mean, you would think for national defense they would be doing this.
Oh, don't get me started. Now we're into global warming. You see, George, okay, James Hansen, Michael Mann, and of course we all know about ClimateGate now. They unfortunately kidnapped true environmentalists, and really what is coming. So if unfortunately they set it up that either you believe that global warming is caused by humans, and that's the only way to address it, or you don't, or you're a skeptic or a non-believer or whatever. What they miss, which is the most important, is the preparation for the changes that are coming, which rolls back to what you're saying. So will there be a heavy impact on crops and food and water? Yes, especially coastal regions. Will the waters rise? Yes. Will there be places of drought? Yes. Are we prepared for that? No.
Not at all. Not at all. We can't. As tragic as Haiti has been, the tsunami that hit Indonesia years ago, Katrina in New Orleans, it has pointed out to me, Mitch, even with your FEMA experience, we can't handle a major catastrophe. We just can't physically do it.
It's going to get worse than that. Not only can we not handle one. Matter of fact, George, I just have to get this in. I hope I'll squeeze it in because it was like the fifth day of my training with FEMA, and my trainer Richard Gelb was so great. He says, there's going to come a time. There were like seven of us in this class.
Yeah.
That people are going to come to you and look at you wide-eyed as if you're their savior. But you need to let them know that it's not going to be the police department that comes to save them. It's not going to be the fire department that comes to their rescue. It's not going to be search and rescue that comes to their attention. It's not going to even be us.
It's going to be their neighbors.
It will be your neighbors.
Yep.
That's right.
Absolutely. Mitch, stay with us. What we're going to do when we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. We'll take phone calls with Mitch Battros. We'll also talk about Yellowstone. There's a pressure point there. More and more earthquakes. As Mitch has always said, when they get into the fours, then we got a problem. They're not there yet, but we'll talk with them about it when we come back, and we'll take your phone calls. And this hour, Earth Changes Media. Mitch Battros joins us as we will talk about a number of great stories, including the Kepler mission, its new report on Earth-like planets, and also the Mayan Elder Prophecy. Oh, my, what is all that about? Mitch will be our guest in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Mitch Battros began production of his syndicated television show, Earth Changes TV, in 1995. He's been all over the map lately, covering major events and major stories, and he's back on Coast to Coast AM. Mitch, how are you? How was the holiday?
Oh, it was great. Had a great time, spent the time with the extended family. I have a little toddler who got to meet some new cousins and aunts and uncles. Wonderful time.
Super. I've got a new grandson. My son and his wife had a little child, little Simon, who was born on my son's birthday. That's just incredible synchronicity.
Well, it is, George. And, times like this does remind me, at least me, and I think probably most of your audience, really it's all about family when you come back down to it. And you could expand that to community, which really wraps around to why I do what I do. I'm often asked, how can I research and write about these earth-changing events and prophecies and have what seems to be, to people evidently, quite a bit of an excitement about it. And, the reason is what I believe to be the purpose of the earth changes and the transition. And that is that it's not about punishment. It's about bringing us together, about bringing us back to community. Perhaps it's the experience I've had with this Christmas, and once again, reminding myself that really it's all about family and community. And when I'm away from here and I'm back in Seattle, and I'm just lost. I'm lost in cyber world. And then it's just great to get grounded again. And I think if we're not able to do that on our own, which I think is part of this transition in prophecy and understanding, that we're going to get a little help to help us come back to community, where once again we'll have to rely on our neighbor, which we probably don't even know their name today.
That's true. You've got some great stories up there at earthchangesmedia.com. I've been reading them for the past week.
Yes, sir. And let me start with one that's not very pleasant, and I think this happened. It went under my radar screen. I would have picked this up immediately. Matter of fact, when it happened, when a large earthquake occurs, I immediately go to the tsunami warning center to see what's going on. Well, this one slipped by all of us because it just came out just a few hours ago. That 7.2 earthquake that hit Solomon Islands, when I researched about, what happened over there, it said no tsunami. Nothing happened. Well,
right.
Two tsunamis occurred, one of them destroying a full village. The tsunami measured 10 feet, and they're just coming out with this today, and I think part of it is, as sad as it may be, is the holidays. I mean, people take vacations all around the world. They take time off during these holidays, and things just kind of get through, and this was one of them. Rescuer workers finally reached the remote islands at the epicenter of the earthquakes, and many people had escaped with serious injuries. Dozens of houses were flattened. And these two tsunamis, relatively large aftershocks, 6.5 to 6.2. And just like Samoa, that hit the Samoa Islands, I think it was the British Samoa Island that got the worst of it, the American Samoa Island, although some people died there as well. It wasn't as devastated. But we forget about this. And these are the types of things that are happening. Matter of fact, George, you might remember the last time I was visiting with you, I told you there's something about December. And it was totally unscientific. I mean, you know, you asked me, well, why? I said, I don't know.
It was a gut feeling, wasn't it?
A gut feeling. But what I didn't realize was that the month of December was a blue moon. The definition of a blue moon is 2 full moons in 1 month.
And we had one in the beginning of December and one on the 31st.
Exactly. And as you know, my research along with Jim Berklin, we're kind of at the forefront of this, of what we have described as fluid displacement. And you might have noticed, I've got them listed here, 4 or 5 pretty large earthquakes. Just a few hours ago, by the way, just a breaking news event, a 6.7 earthquake about 3.5, 4 hours ago hit the Sandwich Islands. And again, I raced over to the Tsunami Warning Center, and they say no tsunami. Now, this one is remote. This is a really remote area.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect, much damage or any damage, unless it was a really large earthquake and a big tsunami occurred. But I'm not expecting anything from that. But here we are. Yes, we've had several earthquakes and volcanoes. 4 volcanoes starting with the Mayon, or Mayon, however you pronounce it, over in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. That happened on the 23rd, and that went right to the brink. Matter of fact, for a short time, they did have it. They escalated to code red. They were forcing people off. Many of the farmers refused to go. They were like the guy in Mount St. Helens. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, he just hung in there.
Yeah, he said, I'm not going anywhere. This is and of course he's buried under about 30 feet of ash in Spirit Lake. And then right after the Mayon in the Philippines, Redoubt volcano up in Alaska reached code yellow. That was on the 28th. Then going over to Puerto Rico, the airports and the airlines were shifted around because of Montserrat. The huge 10,000 feet or more of ash just came out of nowhere. I don't remember hearing anything that people were monitoring Montserrat. It just seemed to pop.
Why is the planet so active, Mitch?
Well, that's going to bring me right back around to the Mayans. And by the way, George, I've been really thinking about, often people ask me, where did the Mayans get this information? How could they have such insight? And then some people suggest the alien thing and all that. Sure. I just can't wrap my arms around that, but this is what I thought of. What if the Mayan people were much older than we believe? What if the Mayan civilization is older than 10,000 years? What if it's 50,000 years? Mm-hmm. Would that make a difference? Now, we know that Mayan, the characteristics of Mayan, Mesopotamian, Mesoamerican, have crossed, before the continent split. That there was a connection between Egypt and as they come through the United States and many of the indigenous people, that there's much more of a connection than was once believed. What if the Mayan civilization is much older than we think, and that is why they have this keen understanding. Now, it's true, a special people. Not a lot of the tribes may have focused on the skies as the Mayans have. But it does make sense if there was more of a history that they certainly could put these cyclical events together.
What if they were Atlanteans?
Well, I'm not going to even cross that out because most arrows point Peninsula or the Caribbean. So who knows?
All right. Now, let's talk a little bit let's go out into space for a moment. We'll come back with the mines.
About the Kepler?
The Kepler. Incredible story. They're finding these exoplanets.
That's right.
What's going to happen? When are we going to find the Earth planet that has vegetation and everything else?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that, but I think they're really looking. And I'm not so sure they would tell us when they find it, at least not right away. I don't want to get Hoagland-y on this, but I was a little bit surprised that my people inside NASA are straightforward people. I mean, they don't mess around, so I don't think it comes from them. That I was led to believe that it was going to be that NASA was going to make a pretty hefty announcement today. What they ended up disclosing, I think you might have mentioned some of this.
Yeah.
Are these 6 planets that are uninhabitable? They're more like a Venus. I mean, you can't use 2,200 degree Fahrenheit and so
close to their star.
That's right. Now, what is interesting are the orbits that they have. 4-day orbit and stuff like that. That is very interesting, but nothing like what I was hoping for. I was thinking that it wasn't going to be 50% of Earth, but it was going to be much closer. Let's say 20% of Earth-like, or maybe 30% of Earth-like. And that didn't happen. But I think it will. It may happen in our lifetime, and I'll tell you why. Because the instruments that are out there now and the information that's coming back is astounding. I'm just so excited about that. I think that is the new I think that's part of the transition, if you will. And I am going to speak a little bit after the bottom of the hour about Mayan prophecy. What's been told to me anyway, more is to be revealed, but I will share what's already been told to me. But I again, that hooks back into what's being found now in the science community, and that is the closeness of the symbiotic, very close-knit enmeshment that we have with not only our solar system, but with our galaxy. I mean, we're starting to address it as a family member now. It was just a decade ago to talk about the Milky Way was so far-fetched. It just was not comprehensible. Well, now it's being talked about so much and being defined so well. It's like it's part of the family, maybe a distant uncle, but we're starting to understand it a little bit. And then, of course, they're going even out beyond that. And what they're finding is that the space between space, ether, these charged particles, what I've been writing about for years, is the glue that connects everything. That goes back to the Mayans. The Mayans talk about the galactic center, and that there would be a more intense tunnel, if you will, of kind of a narrow band, almost as if you were to shoot a laser, although I'm exaggerating. But it would be a narrowing of a band of charged particles that certainly could have an influence on the solar system, starting with our sun. All that is starting to make sense now. And so I think the Mayans are on something. But again, to remind the audience, December 21st, 2012 is not like hitting a switch. The 22nd is going to look just like the 21st. The 19th is also going to look, it's not going to be anything like that. But there is this gradual escalation, not only in the Earth changes, but in the finding and developing of our understanding and how that's going to manifest with this stuff out in space. And I thought you were very intuitive when you were speaking about an asteroid. Mm-hmm. I, too, believe that something's up. Evidently, the Russians do, too.
Yeah, they do.
Did you catch wind of that?
I sure did. Yeah. I was on vacation last week, Mitch, but I saw a story where they are contemplating trying to send some kind of bomb to an asteroid to blow it up or divert it.
That's right, and they're speaking specifically of the big one that we all
Apophis.
know about. Yeah, Apophis. And they're trying to elicit an association with NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Chinese Space Agency. And I think they're serious about it. We do know that NASA did miscalculate. That initially they thought it was something like 1 million to 1, and then all of a sudden it became 26,000 to 1. I mean, that's a big difference. So there is something going on, and I will just drop a little hint that what I've been told, and I haven't been told everything yet, they just dropped a few little hints, that one of the predictions, if you will, of 2010 is that we will have a near-miss bolide. It'll be one of those, not a big one, not a 6-miler, or, it'll probably be a meter or a few meters. But it's going to be probably a dark asteroid, and we're going to have one of those 24-hour notices.
Yeah, I don't know why I see this, Mitch, but I do. It's as clear as day. And, I even had, as I was telling our dear friend, Colonel Major Ed Ames, that, I could see like one of those CNN-type reporters in front of the action of a crater in the background with smoke and ash up there and everything. And I don't know. That's what I see.
Well, you can't dismiss it, George. You've done a lot of work in that. You wrote about it in your book, and which is also part of Mayan prophecy. Did you know that, and I'm sure you did, but for maybe the few in your audience that didn't know, part of Mayan prophecy is they describe this transition that we're in now. And what I describe as a transition is a time from, say, 2 or 3 years ago until, say, 5 years after 2012. We're already in it. Let's look at 2012 as an apex. So an apex is like a bell curve. You have this big upside-down U. And maybe, 2012 is the middle of it. And part of this time is that we are all, who are open to it, developing this sense of intuition and integrity and this ability to really sense what is to come.
Well, let's talk about this other story. A massive white dwarf, they say, will explode eventually and probably have some kind of threatening Earth-like catastrophe, but it's millions of years away. So I guess we shouldn't worry too much about that, or should we?
Yes and no. No, with that particular one, yes, for the ones we're not talking about. Again, remember, NASA's only found is the finder of about 10% of the asteroids. The vast majority are found by the amateur astronomy community. But still, even with that, even putting the two together, only a small percentage of the larger asteroids have been tagged, and so there's many smaller ones that have not. And more than likely, it will be an amateur astronomer that will discover it. Now, but related to these exploding planets, which has everything to do with these charged particles, that's what a gamma ray burst is. That's what they're talking about. A gamma ray burst, unlike a solar flare or coronal mass ejection, is so powerful. I mean, not to be. I don't expect anything like this to happen. Let me say that first. Not in our lifetime. But if it was to happen, that would be the kind of thing that would, basically melt the Earth. So these things are really so far out. We're talking about light years away, and still has an effect on our solar system. The Chandler, for example, which is kind of a sneaky way of saying that they're not that they are paying attention to this. NASA is very much so. That they actually have an intense interest in our galaxy and universe, and one of the ways they're showing it is by expanding and pouring money into the Chandler operation. The Chandler is a spaceship, it's a telescope, it's 3 components, I can't remember what the third is, and all scientific instruments with one big satellite out there that measures these X-rays, the bigger ones, the galactic comic rays, and the gamma ray burst. They have pumped some money into this, I believe, because they know something is happening. And I think something in this area, nothing I can define. I would never, put this in any type of review because I don't think anybody knows enough about it, other than that we have a keen interest in these high-charged energy X-rays, these charged particles, and they seem to be coming from somewhere. We're starting to narrow it down, and many of them are light years away, but some are not. Some are in the neighborhood.
Mitch, when we come back, we're going to take some phone calls with you. Mitch Battros with us. EarthChangesMedia.com is his website. He's also written a couple books out there, most notably Solar Rain and Global Warming, A Convenient Disguise. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, have you picked up the After Dark magazine yet? You can do so by calling 1-888-727-5505 or coasttocoastam.com. On our next Coast to Coast program, Neil Slade joins us with his latest work, Book of Wands, to talk about the brain's pre-existing neurocircuits and how it develops creativity, intelligence, or lack of. That'll be our next Coast to Coast show. Of everything that's been going on, Mitch, that you've been investigating, is there anything that is extremely earth-challenging right now that could be a problem?
Well, there is this flurry of earthquakes and volcanic activity, and we don't know exactly what's going on or if it's escalating. Some people are very wary of what's happening, and, of course, we're always curious as to what the cause is. And, by the way, George, I just got just another news flash here. Well, we were talking, this is just breaking news right through Coast to Coast AM and George Norrie. It's just now hitting the press about what's happening over in the Solomons. It's much worse than anybody thought. It just hit the Associated Press and the New York Times. 1,000 people homeless, 200 homes destroyed, and this is from the tsunamis that didn't happen.
Yeah.
It was quite serious. 10-foot tsunami is nasty, and of course it's the surge that caused the most destruction. A third of the island, they're saying, a third of the island is homeless right now.
Unbelievable. Okay, back to the calls. Let's go to New Bern, North Carolina, east of the Rockies. We've got Wes. Hey, Wes, good morning.
Good evening, George, or morning, I should say.
Sure thing.
And, Mitch, I had a question, Mitch, maybe two here, if I can get with the second one in. I've done some research on the planet Nibiru, and I was wondering if you could give me some more information on that. I've looked and done some research, and I know the Sumerian culture from a while back there named it. I mean, it names Planet of the Crossing, and it shows a path that it comes to our solar system somewhere between Jupiter and us. And I was curious, is there any truth in that? And then you can enlighten me on that some.
I would say that there could be truth to that, but I can also say that there's no sign whatsoever of a planet that size. A planet, because I've heard it anywhere from the size of Mars to Earth to Jupiter, whatever. However, if it's anywhere close to that size, believe me, astronomers around the world will catch that, and it would be months before it even came into our solar system. So I wouldn't say that it couldn't happen. I would say there's no sign whatsoever at this time of any such planet that size coming around.
Right, that's the ease then. Second question would be the solar flares that come off the sun, the one that came off the back side of the sun a while ago. Mm-hmm. If one came off the front side towards us, I mean, what would be the extent of the damage? I mean, would the radiation be enough to kill animals and to cause severe burns on us? Or, I mean, could you elaborate on that?
It's possible, but mostly it would be from the charged particles. So it would be mostly electronic. This has happened before. It's not the first time. And we had a near miss in 2003. It was the largest solar flare ever recorded, an X45.
Jeez.
Now, luckily, it had just started going around the eastern limb of the sun. Thank goodness. But even with it just crossing the eastern limb, it still had an effect on us. But if it it was a direct hit, and say a reasonable size like an X5, sure, it would knock out power grids. It would knock out satellites. And my belief, my research tells me that there's a direct connection to the Earth's core. So I would say it would have an effect on tectonic plates. But as far as some idea of like we're going to catch fire or something like that, no. Something that might cause that would be a galactic, I'm sorry, not a gamma ray burst. Basically an exploding star, a nova of some type that could happen, light years away, but still be close enough to have an effect. If it was in our neighborhood, it could. I mean, there's no hope. But that's not likely.
It's a big but, right?
That's a big but.
Montrose, California. Hey, Annie, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Annie from Montrose, California.
Sure thing. Go ahead, Annie.
Okay. Mitch, you were talking about solar flares. Now, when they are burst from a star, doesn't it disintegrate everything in its path? Every little particle out there, or does it pull it into the star itself?
Well, we're talking about two different things. The solar flare is something that's emitted from the sun.
No, I'm not talking about a small solar flare. I'm talking about
like a gamma ray burst, right?
Right, from a pulse star. Doesn't it destroy everything around it, or does it pull those particles into it and then continue to explode?
Well, the answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's some who believe, some of the solar physicists, that this is in part, and I don't think it's in every situation, but this can create a black hole. So you're right. It has both an implosion and an explosion.
Okay.
Yes, and these events that have been occurring again that are picked up by the Chandler are light years away. In other words, it happened before you were born.
Before any of us were born, most likely.
Right. Right. And yet it was so powerful that it's being picked up by instruments, and sometimes even a little bit stronger than that. It may have some effect on far out satellites.
Okay. And my next question is, we're having so many earthquakes around the world. I mean, I know Mother Earth is pissed off at us, but is there something going on with our tectonic plates that we are moving or shifting Earth back to where it was thousands of years ago, or is it just splitting apart and water's just going to come in and fill it up and there's going to be more ocean than land?
Well, no one knows exactly what the end result. I mean, the way you're describing, I think it could be far off. I have seen some of the maps that have been around. I don't see that happening as part of Mayan prophecy or in these next, say, 5 to 10 years. I don't see big land masses breaking off and that kind of thing. But yes, I think there is definitely an effect on tectonic plates, and I believe that it's these charged particles that are having an interaction with the Earth's core. And science is starting to prove that out. What we don't know are the source and the strength. In other words, we don't have a handle on the cycles of what's happening. We're getting closer. My research focused on the cycles between the sun and us, and I've gotten pretty darn accurate. But now we're going beyond that and seeing, well, what makes the sun tick and what parts of the galaxy is there a repeatable cyclical events that occur and what happens. So it's really kind of an open answer at the moment.
Okay, we go to Anchorage now in Alaska. Hey, Joan, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I think that's for Mitch and you, George. I think that the asteroid that's coming is going to hit Mars and not the Earth.
I hope you're right.
yeah, well, because God is mad and he wants people to recognize he is the creator, and people aren't recognizing that. And as far as the earthquakes are concerned, I think it's all the oil being drained out of the earth.
Some people have theorized that, Mitch.
That's right. That is fluid displacement.
Yep.
Fluid comes in many ways, and yes, I would agree with her that oil can cause the shifting of tectonic plates, whether it be an expansion of fluids or a contraction of fluids. Either way, that's how these events occur. So now, related to the religious question, speaking as a former altar boy and still practicing Catholic. I loved St. Paul II. I mean, he was so cool, and I really missed him when he died. But he said this that just blew my family away, and it just thrilled me. He said he believes that creation and evolution can coexist. I love that thought, that creation and evolution can coexist. So God could play a part in all of it.
Next up, Memphis, Tennessee. Kenneth, first-time caller. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Hey, how are you, man?
Great, Ken. Go ahead.
Yes, so far I'm enjoying the show. I'm enjoying the guest. And I have a question for you. Back in 1995, there were a group of scientists who said that we, meaning the Earth and our solar system, will pass through a belt of photon radiation, and that it could cause either 3 days of total darkness or 3 days of total sunlight. And at that time, they didn't know which.
All I can say is that I've heard about that. I think that comes from the Starship people, or that Hawaii group. I can't remember what they call themselves. I haven't found any evidence of anything called a photon belt. Perhaps but there's another big but. We do talk about waves of charged particles. I wouldn't call it a photon belt, and I don't know about these 3 days, this and that. But I do expect waves, and sometimes focused in a kind of a small focused, like a laser type thing. Again, I don't mean to pinpoint it that much, but it will be kind of a more tight instead of an expansive wave of charged particles. I think that will happen. But I, in knowing what I know about the Galactic Federation people or whatever, that I think we're talking about two different things.
Mitch, any concern about the volcano there by La Palma that that thing could bust loose and create a tsunami that would wipe out the eastern seaboard of the U.S.?
Well, of course it could. I've been keeping a very close eye on the Puerto Rico Trench. That is very much like the Cascadia subduction zone. That's what it is. The Puerto Rican Trench is a subduction zone. And subduction zones are prone to very, very large earthquakes. And, of course, earthquake, if it's nearby a volcano, certainly would have an effect, or vice versa. They're kind of married. And, yes, that could be extremely dangerous for the East Coast.
We go to Halifax, Pennsylvania now, east of the Rockies. Wayne, good morning.
Good morning. My question is, this government, they're always testing their nuclear bombs, underground. They drill down so far and then they test them. You think that disturbed the volcano lava to make them erupt?
I don't know about. I guess if you dropped a nuke right down a volcano, in an inactive volcano, Mitch, what would happen?
Well, it depends on the definition of inactive. I mean, if there's a magma tunnel, anywhere around there, if it was a Yellowstone, we'd be in. It would be. I don't know what the answer is. I can't help but think it would have an explosive, pun intended, causal effect. It's only 400 miles down, and they didn't think there was a magma tunnel under Yellowstone at all. This is new information, and it's closer and larger than they thought, and it goes way out into the west, connected to the Cascadia Cascadia Range, with the 7 live volcanoes, the largest of which is Mount Rainier. And that's another thing they didn't belief is that there was a connection between them all. That there's actually these these tunnel-like tentacles that actually connect this whole thing.
And that's dramatic, isn't it?
It is to me. Yes.
I bet when you were a kid, one of your favorite movies, Journey to the Center of the Earth.
It was.
I knew it.
And the original one, I don't. Wasn't it Pat?
Pat Boone. Pat comes on the program quite often. You would have gotten a kick out of being in the studio with him talking about that movie.
Oh yeah. That really was one of my favorites.
Do you think there are tunnels that will get us like that down into the center of the planet? God knows what's there.
Yeah, I don't have that is so covert. If indeed it's happening, boy, gee, I wish I had those kind of connections. I think it's science. I think we have the equipment and technology, but I am not aware of anything.
What do you think of Admiral Byrd's so-called discovery?
Oh boy, that that sounds really cool. That would be one hell of a movie. That would be one of my. And then you go down there and the dinosaurs and stuff. I've looked at that and I haven't been able to. I don't think it would pass a real scientific peer review. I'll just put it that way.
Not at all. Mitch, a couple more minutes to go. What's new on your plate these days?
It's this still. I'm still focusing on these new instruments and findings that are coming through, and just like with tonight's disclosure of the tsunami at the Solomon Islands, I'm often the first to get it. And to me, if people aren't following it very much, and sometimes, I try to describe things in ways that people can understand. But it's so exciting, the new scientific findings, again, of not just our solar system, but beyond our sun, into our galaxy, which is like a distant uncle now, that we're getting reacquainted with, and beyond, and putting this puzzle together is just so exciting to me. And I'm about as excited now as I was when I was doing my research for solar rain, my book Solar Rain and Global Warming, the connection between the sun and the earth. I'm just feeling those same kind of feelings that often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and that's why I'm effective. Honest to God, George, the reason they often call me the Bob Woodward of the science community is for that reason. NASA doesn't know what NOAA is doing. NOAA didn't know what NASA was doing. When I asked them about El Nino, La Nina, well, I went to NOAA. They were able to give me some answers. Told me about the Southern Pacific oscillations and these shifting ocean currents. But as soon as I asked them, well, what causes that? They said, go ask NASA. They said that I think it has something to do with these jet streams. And so I had to go to NASA. I said, well, NASA, what's up with this jet stream thing? What causes that? Well, the magnetic field shifts from time to time, and when the magnetic field shifts, it has a influence on our atmosphere, and will shift these jet streams.
Yeah, well, it sure does. Mitch, thank you so much for being on the program. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Laudesor, Ross Mitchell, George Knapp, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.